Welcome to Sounds Like Portraits. I'm Philip Ungar. This is a podcast with creative humans. In this episode, you'll hear Charles Shackelton. Shackleton? Yes, that rings a bell. He's a relative of the famous polar explorer Ernest Shackelton, who died in 1922. Charles' field of exploration is wood for making furniture. When I sat with him, he told me how he uses handmade techniques to instill his high-quality pieces of furniture with character and life. For some of his most beautiful pieces, he says, it hurts to give them because it's like a part of his soul. It's time to listen to him. But before, he told me what he tried to do all his life.
All my life, I've always tried to try new things all the time. And sometimes people get annoyed with me because I come up with a system of doing things. And as soon as I've mastered the system, I want to change things out. I'm a furniture maker, so I also translate that to my furniture making.
So you like to experiment?
I like to experiment, but probably it's rooted in something that's actually it's very simplistic, repetitive motion. But I get very bored very quickly doing the same thing over and over again.
You belong to the Shackleton family. One of your ancestors is the famous polar explorer, Ernest Shackelton. Is his story still alive in your family?
Well, when Shackleton got back from his expedition, which failed to cross the Antarctic, he got back during the war and nobody had died. And that was not seen as very heroic at the time of the war. So the story was quite easily pushed away, particularly by the British, who didn't like to express a lot of emotion. And a couple of them went off to war and died shortly afterwards at war. But it was really, I think it was in the late 1950s, Alfred Lansing published a book called Endurance, which is the name of the ship. And Alfred Lansing was an American, and he realized that this was an extraordinary story of optimism. Shackleton had a great saying, optimism is true moral courage. And the optimism was that he got all his guys, I think there was 28 guys, back alive out of the most horrific series of accidents and misfortune. And so that was recognized, particularly by the Americans, who I always see as entrepreneurial and positive, as an incredible adventure story that had repercussions to all of us living our daily lives, even at the point of getting out of bed in the morning.
Are you inspired by this family story?
I have to tell you that when I grew up, nobody paid any attention to that story at all. And when they came up with the exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History, they had Carolyn Alexander had a very hard time extracting stories from descendants of the relatives because they really were embarrassed by the fact he didn't do what he said he was going to do, and everyone came back alive. So when I was growing up, my eldest brother, Jonathan, was very hooked on the story and thought it was a wonderful story. We all paid no attention until he traveled to the Antarctic, which was one of his life's goals, and he started going there, and Shackleton at the same time was becoming a hero in a lot of people's minds. And so my brother Jonathan began to be feted all over the world, feted as in F-E, whatever that little thing is over the E, for knowing the story and being able to lecture about it. And so as soon as Shackleton became famous, we all decided to go along to all these lovely dinners that were put on for him, and we started following the story.
Coming back to you, as a child, did you enjoy making things by hand? Is it something you like to do?
The direct answer is I was obsessed with making things always with my hands. And I was terrible at books and academics.
So how did you come to make furniture?
I had a car crash, and with my mother picking up wood to make a bookcase, and could have been a very nasty car crash. The car was written off. My mother was badly shaken up. I didn't really sort of notice what happened. But in the next few weeks, I realized that I could have died. And I thought, I'd like to fill my life up with something that I enjoyed. My process was, you only live once. I don't want to do what I heard one truck driver say to me, is that he worked all his life, didn't really like his job, and then at 65, he was going to become a furniture maker and do what he really wanted to do. And then he died like 2 days later. I did not want that scenario on my hands. And I thought, I'm going to do what I really want to do now, which is making furniture, functional furniture made by hand.
So, can you tell me about your creative process, about your making process? Can you describe how to make a chair, for example?
What I would do is that I'd take a blank piece of paper and I might be looking at you, and you might have suggested that you need a new chair. Like, I actually met someone this morning who was looking for a new little chair for their balcony. And I looked at he had a very small deck and he had 2 cafe chairs, but they were cheap. And he would like me to make chairs, but with my character in them. So the biggest thing I do when I meet a client is that I find out about how they live. And I will ask them, first off, where the chair is going to go, but I'll ask them, are you going to sit out here and have cocktails? Are you going to do this with someone? Do you have a lot of parties? Do you have kids? What other spaces have you got that you might want to move them to? All that kind of thing. So I find out about their lifestyle and their life. I always say food and sex are the basis of our business. In other words, dining tables and beds. And so if someone's looking for a new dining table, I will find out about their lifestyle. I'll also ask them, it's almost like therapy, and I'll say, do you visualize, like, are you a round table sort of person, or are you a rectangle, like boards in medieval times, or do you want something funky? Just to go into their subconscious to find out what their little picture is in their head when you say dining table.
So you're a therapist, a kind of therapist?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're finding out about their lifestyle, and you're also trying to tap into their creativity and what they know. So you try to dig into that person's subconscious to find out what the picture is in their brain that they had of a dining table. And generally, they will tell you very quickly whether they want a roundy type extending dining table or they want a plain table with straight boards. Whether they want something quite decorative or modern or traditional. They will have a picture. The tricky thing comes when you get a husband and wife and they have slightly different pictures and you're trying to create a dining table that suits them all. I went to a customer on Monday and they're looking for a dining table set, and they were the straight board type of people and they were the decoration type of people, despite the fact it being quite a modern house. What was really interesting was that they have 3 children, but 2 of them were there. They were teenagers, and the parents included the 2 children as well into the discussions. I brought along about 10 chairs, and I asked them to look at the chairs, don't talk to each other, and sit in them, because chairs are like wine, that you get an immediate impression when you sit down in them as to whether you like them or not, and the same with a look. And what amazed me was that the whole family kind of agreed instantly on which chair they liked. And it wasn't a chair that we sold very often. So I was kind of blown away by that. So I kind of went from there.
So you need to have a conversation to start creating your pieces of furniture.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that will inspire my subconscious. Now, generally, brewing in my mind is a style or something I want to try. And I will express that to them, and sometimes they say, oh my God, I love that. And so that's an opportunity for me to try a style that I'm looking for, particularly in this day and age. And I more and more, I'm interested in simplicity and how much character you can get into the simplest possible object.
You need a conversation with your customers. What kind of conversation do you have with the wood, with the material, while you're working on it?
When a lot of people in the woodworkers and such like talk about having conversation with the wood, I have to say I love working with wood. I love the way it fits together. I love the way it works with a hand plane. I don't know whether I have a conversation with the wood because I choose the wood from the rack and it looks beautiful. A lot of woodworking is trying to whip that wood into a very specific shape. There are furniture makers who are very organic and loose, and they follow the grain of the wood. but they're pretty rare, actually. But, people talk about the wood singing and listening to it. I don't want to demean that at all. But no, I'm very interested in the designing and the process with the customer. I guess at the end, I love putting the finish on the wood. It's like developing in the old days a black and white photograph and seeing how the grain comes out. But again, that isn't really a conversation because that's really the wood revealing itself.
What kind of word do you prefer instead of conversation?
I think one of the reasons I make furniture is because I love the natural environment. I also love making. So if I can make something that is grown sustainably without ruining the planet out of a tree, it is almost a way of expressing your love for the natural environment by making something out of it. And I guess that is sort of my conversation. And when I make something and it's in the showroom, that's my way of showing people how beautiful and wonderful wood is. The final part of the woodworking is when you plane it by hand, you get that silky smooth surface. That is something that's super sensuous and manual.
We often talk about adding soul when someone's making an object by hand. What is that puts soul into an object?
We have a belief in our company that when people come looking for a dining table or a chair or a piece of furniture, they will generally look at three different things. The first is the design. The second are the materials, whether it's wood, glass, metal, plastic. The third is craftsmanship, which I think used to come from the word craft, which meant the power over material. And that, you got to be very careful because it's not an artistic element. It's basically the skill with which it's made. Whether it's someone with a beard and an apron up in the hills of Vermont or a factory in China, they can be equally good and equally bad. But it is just the skill with which it's made.
It's technical.
Yeah, it's technical. We have a thing which I have named the fourth dimension, which is when a human being interacts with an object, particularly if they're given the chance to make that object all the way through, but also use hand tools such as chisels and planes, you begin to see some of the character of the person who's making the piece of furniture, even if they haven't designed it. But it's also a fundamental belief that if you are going to buy material objects for your home, it would be nice if those objects actually were meaningful and long-lasting, but in particular meaningful.
Can you be more specific about this fourth dimension?
Well, it reflects the human being. And if you can have an object made by you, it's like on a grand scale, it's like a diplomatic gift because you are giving a piece of your soul to somebody else.
A part of yourself.
Yeah, part of yourself. And some of my most beautiful objects, it hurts to give them because I'm giving away something that I love. And you can see that love that was put into it. Now, some of this may be the emperor's new clothes, and it's all in your imagination. But whether or not it is or isn't in your imagination, the key factor is whether it resonates with the other person. And then you can't really say it is the emperor's new clothes because there is a human connection formed by a material object. We have a picture to illustrate what I'm trying to tell you in a long-winded manner. We have a picture, a print by Van Gogh on the wall in our workshop for visitors to see. And it cost me $4. And it's Van Gogh's room in Arles. It's his bedroom. I looked up the real value, and it was 70 to 80 million. The difference is that's like the difference between our furniture and IKEA furniture. Because IKEA furniture is essentially printed furniture, and it's churned out by the dozen. Our furniture, you can see and feel the brushstrokes or the plane marks of the human being that made it. And I think that gives it meaning.
And I guess that signature is a very important thing for you.
Actually, we do sign and date all our pieces and mark it with the name of the company, but the real signature is the piece of work itself. I put my name on objects because customers think it's more valuable with my name. And if they think it's more valuable because I put my name on it, I'll put my name on it.
Do you sometimes have feedbacks from your customers?
Yes, generally speaking, they love the piece. Sometimes I'm a little bit suspicious about that because
Suspicious.
because they've spent a lot of money. And again, the emperor's new clothes, that they've fallen in love with that object because they've met me, they've seen the workshops, and they knew where it came from. So they're almost like they see more than the object when they look at the object. And I hope it's beautiful, but I think a lot of the beauty comes from inside their mind because it's the story behind it. So when you say feedback from customers, another thing I've noticed about feedback from customers is when people say things and believe things very confidently, people can follow very easily. Whereas if you're very scared and lacking in confidence, people don't follow what you say so easily. So if you're confident about your work and who you are and what you're doing and why you're doing it, people are very interested.
Is it a life lesson?
Oh yeah, everything's a life lesson.
Where does your confidence in yourself come from?
Knowing that I'm going to die within the next probably 20 years, I think it's something worth thinking about. And I've also noticed that you can, it was like I was saying to someone this morning, I get young people coming to me saying, oh my God, I want a business like yours. I want to be a furniture maker all the rest of my life. And my advice to them is have that dream, have that vision, put it on the star and let it go. And then get on with your daily work and focus on you one step at a time.
I'm gonna leave the kitchen. Please hold the microphone and add whatever you want to the interview.
Can I start talking now? I want to say that at the moment I'm working on what I call the chair of enlightenment, which is a light-up chair. And the light-up chair is all about my fascination with very simple objects, which can also incorporate this. The back of this chair is like a window. I have put into that window all sorts of things that I love, like bark and sky and photographs and gold and things like that. I've also made the seat out of all sorts of different materials like rush and upholstery and wood. And you can interchange all these things. And also the back lights up, so it's like electric. And so I'm exploring making furniture which is, I guess, more abstract and artistic, but still functional. That's my latest venture at the moment. Okay, Philippe?
Thank you, Charles Shackleton, for sharing your story. It was Sounds Like Portraits, a podcast by Philippe Ungar. Music, Charmeuse de Serpent, composed and conducted by Olivier Glisson. See you soon for the next episode.